After decades of promises stretching all the way back to the Apollo era, it's finally a reality. The United States has a functioning crewed base on the moon. It's been a long road. Following the first lunar landings, the dream of a permanent outpost was born, but it took decades just to return to the lunar surface. Even then, it was another 20 years of intense design, construction, and planning before the dream was fully realized. This incredible achievement wasn't a solo mission. It was a massive collaboration between NASA and several commercial space agencies, all pooling their resources, funding, and brightest ideas. The result of this historic partnership? A marvel of engineering and human determination named Aegis 1, our new home on the moon. Have you ever dreamed of walking on the moon? Well, that dream is about to get a whole lot bigger. Imagine a future where you can book a trip to a moon base, not just to look around, but for the ultimate adventure vacation. We're talking about a future moon base hotel, moon skiing, and even moonboarding. And for the real thrill seekers, how about moon rover parasailing? The base is designed with two distinct yet connected areas. One side is purely for commercial fun, your go-to spot for out-of-this-world experiences. The other side is dedicated to NASA's groundbreaking science, research, and exploration. The best part? They're not separate. You can take a guided tour through the NASA labs, see real space science in action, and then the NASA scientists can join you for some zero-gravity fun on the commercial side. It's the ultimate blend of education and exhilaration. Who's ready to book their lunar getaway? 5 years. 5 years since humanity truly returned to the moon, not just to visit, but to stay. Our lunar base, a bustling hub of scientists and adventurers, was a testament to what we could achieve. Life had found a rhythm, a new normal under the watch of a distant Earth. Then, the calm was shattered. Something big, something fast, crashed on the far side. NASA didn't hesitate. A rover team was dispatched immediately, a 4-day round trip into the unknown. We maintained constant contact, their voices a lifeline across the gray desolation. Finally, they arrived. Unable to get too close, they sent out a remote drone for a bird's-eye view. The silence from the crash site was deafening. No atmosphere meant no wind, no sound. And radiation readings? Useless. Space is already buzzing with it. They were flying blind, relying only on what they could see. And what they saw changed everything. The team confirmed it's not natural. It's terrestrial, but not from Earth, meaning it's alien in origin. What we're looking at is a solid object, completely seamless with no visible windows or doors. After a tense wait, the rover team finally got permission to approach it. As they moved in slowly, one member started describing what he was seeing. The object is a brilliant gold color, covered in strange markings. These symbols don't look painted on. They seem to be imprinted right into the structure of the craft itself. It's shaped like a perfect egg, and there's absolutely no sign of any propulsion system. I have no idea how this thing moves. It's just ... There. All right, let's get into the heart of the story. The team began a full 360 scan of the craft, describing it as a golden, egg-shaped object. As they documented it on video, one astronaut, Dan, moved in for a closer look. He reached out and touched the smooth metallic surface. In an instant, a visible arc of energy, like an electrical shock, coursed through him, launching him hundreds of feet back across the lunar surface. The rest of the team, bounding over in the low gravity, rushed to his side. After a quick check of his suit and vitals, they decided to abort the mission. Back on the Aegis 1, the medical team was on standby. They pulled Dan from the rover and rushed him to the med bay. But when the team caught up, Dan was already sitting up, completely fine. "What happened?" the commander asked. Dan just shrugged. "I touched it, saw a flash, and woke up here." The doctor walked back into the exam room, his expression unreadable. He looked at Janice, and then at Dan, who was still sitting on the edge of the exam table. "There's nothing physically or neurologically wrong with him," the doctor announced. "His blood pressure is a little raised, but that's to be expected after a traumatic event." Janice let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. "Can he leave?" she asked. The doctor nodded. "Yes, he can." Dan stood up, his movements a bit stiff, and headed for the door. He needed to get back to the suit room and return his spacesuit. Janice fell into step beside him, the sound of their boots echoing in the quiet corridor. As they walked, she broke the silence. "Did you see anything out there?" Dan paused, his hand hovering over the door panel. He seemed to consider it for a moment, then shook his head. "No. Why?" She shrugged, trying to seem casual. "Nothing," she said. "I just had a strange feeling when I touched your suit." When we finally got back to the suit room, it was bustling. A group of tourists, actual vacationers on the moon, were getting fitted for their own spacesuits. It was a strange sight. Our NASA section was separate, thankfully away from the commercial hustle. We stepped through the hatch into our area, and the familiar quiet of a professional lab returned. I went straight to the inspection closet and hung up my suit. The techs needed to give it a full workup, clean it, check every seal before my next EVA. Speaking of which, I turned to Janice. "So, when are we heading back out?" She shook her head slowly. "Not for a while, Don. We're sending out more probes first. We have to figure out exactly what we're dealing with out there before we risk sending another crew. We need to know what we're getting into. Those strange symbols etched into the craft might be a key. We LL need linguists to examine them and see if they can figure out where this craft came from." Dan looked at her, his expression filled with concern. "We can't just leave it out there forever. We need to bring it in and study it." Janice reassured him. "We will, but we have to be smart about this. Look at what it did to you. We need to find some kind of material that wants to react to it or create another electrical shock. Besides, look on the bright side. Now you have more excuses to go out and explore the moon and get an even better view of the cosmos. It's not every day you get to solve a puzzle from the stars." Dan smiled and nodded in agreement. She told him to get some rest, and they would regroup in the morning. Dan headed off to the mess hall, grabbing some dinner before returning to his quarters. He sat down at his table, trying to eat, but his mind was elsewhere, replaying the mission and the strange object they found on the surface. He just couldn't clear his head, so he decided to call it a night and go to bed. As soon as he fell asleep, the mission replayed in his mind, every step, every detail. Then he saw himself touching the object again. That blinding bright light wasn't just a flash anymore. It was a flashback, but a flashback he had never experienced. He was seeing everything through alien eyes. What did it all mean? The dream was so vivid. A great war between two powerful alien species, raging across the stars. One side was losing, desperately sending out a single craft as their last hope. That's when I woke up, screaming. It felt less like a dream and more like a memory. Shaken, I headed straight to medical for a full neurological exam. The on-duty doctor, following protocol, contacted Janice. She arrived a few minutes later, her face etched with concern. "What happened?" she asked. I told her about the nightmare, about the warring aliens, the losing side, the escaping ship. She just stared at me for a long moment, a strange look in her eyes. "That's not like you, Dan," she said quietly. Then her expression hardened. "We need to contact command, now." The doctor handed him a tranquilizer, just something to help him relax and finally get some sleep. He told him to head back to his quarters before it fully kicked in. He just nodded, and Janice gently urged him to go. Once he was out of earshot, she turned to the doctor, her voice low. "Is there anything seriously wrong?" The doctor shook his head, pulling up the scans. "They look perfectly normal. There's nothing physically going on here. Janice nodded slowly, a thoughtful look on her face. He's the most stable person I know. I've never, ever heard of him having nightmares before. The doctor agreed. His scans are clean. But if these nightmares happen again, we can place a neurological monitor on him. It'll measure a wide variety of brain activity and hopefully give us some answers. Janice thanked him and headed back to her quarters. She still had a couple of hours before her day officially started, so she managed to fall back asleep. When she woke up for good, she went straight to the mandatory exercise room. Earth had tried to replicate its gravity on Aegis 1, but it wasn't quite the same. To combat the effects, all personnel had to work out every day, and each session had to be logged for the medical staff to track. After her workout, she went to the mess hall for a quick breakfast and then swung by medical to check in with the doctor. She asked if there was anything new with Dan. He just shook his head. With a heavy heart, she left and made her way to the suit room to put her spacesuit back on its rack. As she walked in, the tech on duty looked up at her, a puzzled expression on his face. He asked, "Why haven't you guys left yet?" "Left yet? What do you mean he left?" Janice stared at the suit technician, completely baffled. The tech just shrugged. He said, "Dan walked in here a couple of hours ago, all frantic. Said it was urgent, that he had to do another eval at the crash site immediately. I told him his suit wasn't fully prepped, but he was so stressed out, he just grabbed it and went." Janice's blood ran cold. She quickly thanked the tech and got on the comms to the control room. "Confirm rover departure time." The control room's voice crackled back, verifying the tech's story. "It left 2 hours ago." A wave of dread washed over her. Janice switched channels. "All hands, scramble. Suit room now. We're heading to the crash site. Let's move." Within minutes, the team was there. A silent tension filling the room as they began to suit up. Janice frantically called the control room. "We need a rover now." "Why?" they asked. "No time to explain," I said. "It's Dan." That was all it took. Permission granted. We scrambled to Rover 4, loaded up our gear, and the bay doors hissed open. As we rolled out onto the vast, silent lunar landscape, the base shrank behind us. It was going to take an hour to get there. My mind raced. Dan was probably already there, maybe for an hour now. Zach, a new guy, broke the silence. "What's he even doing out there?" he asked. None of us had an answer. All we could do was push the rover as fast as it would go across the gray, cratered surface. After what felt like an eternity, we crested a ridge and saw it, Dan's rover, just sitting there in the dust. We pulled alongside, hearts pounding. I peered through the viewport. It was empty. Dan was gone. Zach started frantically looking around, and his heart sank. He saw Dan, lying face down on the ground right next to the object. Dan's hand was still touching it. Zach screamed his name over and over, but Dan didn't answer. He didn't even move. Just then, Janice saw Zach about to rush over. "Zach, don't touch him!" She screamed, her voice filled with panic. Zach stopped dead in his tracks, just inches away from Dan. Their eyes darted around, desperately searching for anything they could use. Janice spotted a webbing strap nearby. Working together, they carefully managed to wrap the strap around Dan's arm, the one still glued to the object. With Zach on one side and Janice on the other, they weaved the strap securely and pulled up with all their might. It took a massive effort, but slowly his arm began to lift away. We found Dan unconscious, a dead weight in the desolate landscape. We had to get him back. Janice and Zach hauled him to the rover where Natalie was waiting, her face a mask of worry. They carefully placed Dan in the back with her. Janice jumped into the driver's seat, her hands steady on the controls, while Zach scrambled into the second rover. We sped back towards Aegis 1, a 2-hour journey that felt like an eternity. Zach was on the comms, his voice tense, alerting the base. "Medical team, be ready. We're inbound." The moment we pulled into the bay, the doors hissed open. The medical team was there, a blur of motion. They pulled Dan out, his body completely catatonic, and rushed him to the med bay. Stripping off his suit as they went, we could only watch, helpless. As the medical team swarmed around Dan, they frantically hooked him up to monitors. His vitals were all over the place. After a few tense minutes, they finally got him stabilized. But just as everyone took a breath, his body went rigid, and he started seizing violently. The team sprang back into action, administering medication to counteract the seizure. It worked. For now, he was stable. The doctor walked out to speak with Janice, his face grim. He told her they had no idea what was causing this. They needed to get Dan back to Earth for proper care, possibly long-term. Janice shook her head. That wasn't an option. She finally confessed that Dan had touched an alien object, and that this was the second time it had happened. The doctor stared at her, completely shocked. "He touched an alien object twice? There's an alien object here?" Janice confirmed it was still out there, on the lunar surface. The doctor started throwing out a theory. What if Dan had formed some kind of connection with that strange object? Taking him off the moon might be catastrophic for his health. Janice was completely stunned, unsure what to do. Finally, she decided she had to contact Earth again. Maybe they could send up specialized equipment, or at least help brainstorm a solution. She ordered the doctor to keep Dan alive at all costs. The doctor assured her that wasn't the immediate problem. In the meantime, he planned to hook Dan up to a neurological scanner to get a baseline on his brain activity. Janice thanked him and rushed to her quarters. She went straight to the comms unit and called NASA, getting the mission commander, Greg, on the line. After she explained everything, Greg just slumped into his seat, shaking his head. "This has become a real mess," he sighed. "How are we going to explain this to the public?" Janice asked if they even had to. Greg's answer was blunt. "Yes, we're a public agency. We have a legal obligation." Then she asked, "Can we twist the truth? Say he fell ill and we need to stabilize him before he heads back home." Greg just looked down, lost in thought. Finally, he said, "That's not your worry. But I need to get the director and his team involved. This is a real mess." Janice didn't have much to say. Greg then warned her, "Stay away from that thing until you hear from me again." Janice nodded, and the communication ended. Greg shot up from his chair, pacing around his office. He sat back down and called the director. It was 11 p.m. Eastern Time. What happens next is something no one could have predicted. The director picked up the call, annoyed, wanting to know why he was being bothered. Greg didn't hesitate. "We have a huge problem in Aegis 1. The director's voice sharpened, asking what happened. Greg laid it all out, explaining exactly what Dan did. You could practically see the director's face sink into his hands, sheer disbelief washing over him. He was completely at a loss, unsure of how to even begin to handle this. Finally, he said he needed to assemble his team immediately. Greg then asked if Lindquist had made any headway on the symbols they'd sent him. The director's response was grim. "No, not even close. He's never seen anything like these symbols before. He even has an artificial intelligence working with him on it, and they're both completely stumped. What could these symbols mean, and what has Don truly unleashed?" Greg nodded, understanding the weight of the director's words. "Don't touch anything. Keep everyone away. Wait for further notice." The priority was clear. Keep the team safe and stop them from doing anything else reckless up there. This whole situation was spiraling into a public relations nightmare, and the director's strained voice confirmed it. Greg agreed, his voice a low murmur. And then, just like that, the channel cut out, leaving him in a suffocating silence. He was alone, trapped with his thoughts. What happens now? How do we even begin to get Dan back? And if we do, will he ever be the same person we knew? He might be lost forever. Pushing those dark thoughts aside, Dan leaned forward in his office chair, his knuckles white. He activated the comms, calling Aegis 1. Janice's voice was the only thing he wanted to hear right now. So I relayed my conversation with the director. The message was simple. Don't do anything stupid up there. I just nodded, and the call ended. As I got up and walked towards medical, I passed all these happy crowds. People were having the time of their lives, completely oblivious to the impending doom. To be honest, I didn't know the full extent of it either. When I finally reached medical, the rest of the team was already there, waiting. They immediately asked about the call to NASA. I looked at them and said, "It's not good. We've screwed up badly, and NASA has no idea what to do next. Even our top linguist and the advanced AI are completely stumped. We were on our own, floating in the dark, with a problem no one on Earth could solve. What happens next? There's nothing we can do but wait and see. For now, Dan is in a coma. He's stable, but the doctors have no idea if he's ever going to wake up. And even if he does, what will his mind be like?" Janice pointed to the strange device on his head, asking Zach what it was. Zach explained it was some kind of neurological monitor meant to measure his brain activity, to see which parts were active and which weren't. Just then, the doctor walked in, his face a mask of astonishment. Janice's heart sank. "What is it?" she asked. The doctor stared at the monitor. "Well," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "he's still in a coma. But every single region in his brain is extremely active, more active than anything I've ever seen. What could this possibly mean for Dan? I've got a friend, a top neurologist, who's about to look at the scans. They're being sent over to him as we speak." Janice, bless her heart, asked what it all could mean. The doctor, he just stood there, completely baffled. The only thing he could suggest was that it might have something to do with that object. We all just stared at each other, the same worried look on every face. He said we might know more once the specialist checks the scans, but for now, all we can do is hope Dan wakes up and is normal. Janice just nodded, but I could see in her eyes she knew it was false hope. Dan might never be the same again. While we waited, she started pacing the halls of Aegis 1, walking past all these happy vacationers who had no idea about the life-or-death situation unfolding just rooms away. The sea breeze felt cool against Janice's face as she sat on the promenade bench, lost in thought. Suddenly, a small voice piped up beside her. "You look sad." Janice turned to see a little girl, no older than 7, looking at her with wide, curious eyes. Janice managed a small smile. "It's nothing, sweetie. Thank you, though." The girl, who introduced herself as Mia, wasn't convinced. "What's wrong?" Janice hesitated, and the words tumbled out. "I have a friend. He's very sick right now." Mia's face lit up with a solution. "Is he getting chicken noodle soup? My mommy always makes it for me when I'm sick, and it makes everything better." Janice's smile was genuine this time, though tinged with sadness. "I think we're a little past chicken noodle soup for him," she said softly. Mia just looked at her, the simple wisdom of a child meeting the complex reality of an adult. Just as things were settling, Zach's voice crackled through Janice's communicator. Anne was awake. Janice turned to Mia, her expression shifting. "My friend's awake. I need to go see him." Mia offered a kind smile. "Of course. I hope he feels better." With that, she rose and walked away. Janice didn't waste a second, jogging back towards medical, weaving through the bustling crowds. Finally, she pushed through the door. There he was. She fixed Dan with a stern, steely-eyed look. He met her gaze, his face grim. "We are in trouble," he said, his voice low. "Yeah, I know we are," Janice replied, crossing her arms. "How are you feeling?" "Better. He confirmed, then repeated. Now we are in trouble. Janice's brow furrowed. Elaborate. Dan told me what happened. He said he woke up in the dead of night, hearing the artifact calling to him, a pull he couldn't resist. It was terrifying. He was trapped inside his own body, watching everything through his own eyes, but he had zero control over his actions. He told me he screamed for help, trying to get anyone's attention, but it was like he was invisible. Everyone just ignored his desperate cries. Then, still not in control, he found himself putting on a spacesuit, getting into the rover, and driving all the way back to the artifact. Once he was there, it forced him to reach out, to touch it again. He fought it. He tried with all his might to pull his hand back, but the force was just too strong. He was completely powerless against it. But he just couldn't get the words out. Finally, Janice had to interrupt him. Don, just get to the part where we're in trouble. He just nodded his head and began to explain. He told us that the moment he touched the artifact, it flooded his mind with a vision of a great galactic war between two alien species, the Zintheres and the Draxnards. The war raged for years, even decades. Eventually, the Zintheres were victorious. They wiped out the Draxnards using biological weapons and sheer, overwhelming numbers. But before the Draxnards went completely extinct, they created this Ark. That's the best way Dan could describe it. They managed to download their entire civilization, their language, history, technology, even their music, everything into this Ark. And then they sent it out into the vast emptiness of space. It hoped that one day it would find a civilization technically advanced enough to understand what the Ark was offering. Hearing this, everyone stepped back, cautious. Janice broke the silence. Okay, so what's the issue? Dan looked at them, his face grim. Since I touched the Ark, it activated. And by activating it, the Zintheres can now track its technology straight to Earth. Janice began to hyperventilate. She stumbled out of the medical bay, trying to catch her breath. She looked around at everyone in the corridor, completely oblivious to the world-ending news she just received. The doctor followed her out and asked if she was okay. No, Janice cried, pushing the doctor away. The weight of it all was crushing. How could she carry this secret alone, knowing that humanity's fate now rested on their shoulders? The clock was ticking, and an ancient enemy was on its way. She caught her breath and walked back into the medical bay, her eyes fixed on Dan. Finally, she broke the silence. Can we just shut this thing down? Dan's expression was grim as he looked back at her. No, he said, his voice low. Once it's activated, that's it. It's on. Zach, ever the optimist, chimed in. Well, it's been a very long time since the war. Maybe they forgot, or moved past this petty fighting. Or maybe they just died off. Dan slowly shook his head. No, he insisted. The Ark showed me images. The Zintheri were put into stasis, waiting for this exact day. The moment this Ark activated, they'd receive a message, awakening them to hunt it down, along with any civilization that has it. He looked at them both, the truth heavy in his words. They will be coming. How long do we have? That's what I asked him. He just looked at me and said he didn't know. Days? Weeks? Years? Maybe years, he finally admitted. I felt the breath get stolen right out of my lungs. He continued, explaining the Ark had weapon systems, ship designs, even power core schematics. He said the Draxnards were way more advanced than the Zintheres, but it wasn't enough. The Zintheres had the numbers. They simply overwhelmed them. Yeah, I thought they were advanced back then, but now, who knows what they've become? I have to call NASA. We are in so much trouble. I walked out of medical, my feet heavy as I headed to my quarters. I was dreading this call, trying to figure out what I could possibly say to the director, but he had to know. We all had to know. We need to prepare for whatever is coming. Phantom Static, where the phantoms speak through the static.